Republicans, Trump supporters, MAGA folk, they're there in the United States. You know that. You probably know some of them. But Norway, are they here? I'm telling you that they are. This episode, I'm speaking with Hans Jakob Winsnes, a Norwegian who is a Trump supporter, MAGA supporter, and Republican ideology supporter. This is an interesting conversation. It kind of blew me away, a few of the things that he said, but we did have a dialogue. This is how you speak to a Republican. This is how you speak to a Trump supporter, to a MAGA person, if you speak with them at all. Check it out. This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen.
I have to say, my first impression of you
is
amazing.
That's my mother's fault.
I love. There's something about America that, I just love the spirit of US, and there's something about Americans that I find it's my people in a way. So, and I'm stuck here in Norway.
Well, the thing is, there's a lot of, and we'll just kind of start it. Yeah. I usually do a countdown, but we're talking, so let's just start the recording. But the thing with America is there's an ideal of what America is supposed to be. And it's this 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or sometimes 3 steps back, 2 steps forward. And it's far from perfect. But it says in the preamble to the Constitution, in order to form a more perfect union, not to continue with a perfect union. Right. So I think that, for all of their flaws, the founding fathers got that part right. There is nothing perfect about America. And I think that's a problem for some people to admit.
Well,
that it's not perfect. It's hard for some people to admit that there's things that need to be worked on. I've never understood that. Why should that be a problem? Why should that be a problem? It doesn't. It's okay to have something to strive towards, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if it was Ben Shapiro or I heard a great point here. It's no one is gonna accuse China or Russia for being for not living up to their ideals. They're not
right. Good point.
Because what do you call when you're Christian, I'm a Christian, and when you don't live up to the ideal you have, you're saying one thing and you do another, you're a hypocrite, right? And no one is saying that about China or Russia, that they're hypocrites.
No. I read this just the other day.
Yeah, and I think
it wasn't Ben Shapiro that said it, though.
No,
I don't quote Ben Shapiro all that often, but somebody did say that. Yeah.
And it's something about, it's important that we have a value that we're striving towards. Yeah. We will never get there.
Yes, agreed.
But it's
that process of striving towards it that brings progress.
Yeah.
That brings change.
And I think that what I don't like I'm on the right, very much on the right. The funny thing with Norwegian politics, for example, is FRP would probably be in the Democratic Party in the U.S.
I get what you're pointing towards, but I think that's a little extreme. I don't think FRP would be in the Democrat. I think all other Norwegian parties would be, though.
Well, at least the Democratic Party of the 80s, or the JFK era, or I haven't studied that much, but the Democrats have moved a lot left since the JFK.
They sure have.
Yeah.
They sure have. But
so if you say FRP would be definitely in the Democratic Party in the 1970s or 60s.
I still disagree, though. Well, okay, if we go, 60s, 70s. I look at FRP's harsh, sometimes straight up anti-immigration forget anti-immigration, anti-immigrant rhetoric. And that tells me that, of course, there's a certain time period in American history where that matched up with the Democrat Party, but it certainly doesn't today. I think that's the main thing that FRP does that makes them far to the right of American Democrats.
But that's one thing that, for example, I think that you can't cross over from Norway to US there when it comes to immigration, because the thing with, like, my wife is Canadian, and the thing with US and Canada is that they're all immigrants.
Yeah.
You're a very young country. You're all immigrants. In Norway, we have thousands of years of history. Yeah. Europe has that.
Yeah,
so when we, for example, Norway, we have a 1,000-year history. So when you are, like, I work with a guy, and he could seem right out racist, but I didn't see him as that. He just liked the way that his country was, and he didn't.
Where was he from?
Up north.
Okay.
Like farther up north than Trondheim, like far up north. And he
up in Finnmark or Troms?
Nordland, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
So he liked the way that his country was, and he didn't want to change the country. For example, like, I've traveled quite a bit. Like, I took a Bible school in a small island called Tonga, which is in South Pacifics. And I love the culture. I love being there. And I didn't want it to be, because I see with a lot of immigration, and I think that this is where I actually line up with a lot of people also on the left, but it's like, I like cultures. I don't want the Mexican culture to be blended out to be kind of milk toast.
You said something that a lot of Norwegians say very often. Whenever you guys talk about preserving the Norwegian culture, or when you get into discussions about immigration, you guys will talk about how immigration is so new in Norway.
Yeah.
How old are you?
45.
Okay. So you could have lived roughly 1.5 times, and immigration to Norway has been normal. So my question is how long should immigrants be patient while waiting for full acceptance, while waiting for a lessening of the vitriol that comes up, the ugliness that comes up when there's talk about immigration in Norway? Because it's, and I put this in quotes for those who are not watching and just listening, I'm saying quote, because immigration is so new, in air quotes.
Well,
how much longer is it going to take? People should have a certain amount of news consumption, and that doesn't mean sitting and watching the news. That can mean that. It can mean things from the internet. It also means life experience. How long is it going to take for this, what I think is an irrational fear of immigration in Norway, to die down? Because I think the Norwegian culture, I thought you guys were tougher than that. I thought the Norwegian culture was so strong, so meaningful. It's very exclusive in the sense that it's different. And I thought that was strong enough. And immigration really is, it's a microcosm of the Norwegian society. Where is the threat is one question. And how long is it going to take to stop looking at immigration as a threat? That's the second question. We're talking a generation and a half already.
Yeah. Well, let me take a story from my life. I grew up in a very small place, 1,500 people out in the boonies, an hour and a half from Trondheim.
Which town?
It's called Singsås.
Singsås.
Yeah, it's a very small town. And there, I think we had 2 people at school that didn't come from 2 Norwegian parents.
Okay.
They were from Thailand. And when I was 14, maybe, I got a foster brother, and his father and his mother and father came from South America.
Yeah.
So
Do you know what country?
Yeah, British Guyana.
British Guyana.
Mm.
Okay.
And he was the only black kid at school.
Mm-hmm.
And he had some, like, his parents were divorced and he got into drugs. He had some issues, but he was the only black person in school. There was no other black.
No.
Then I went to US the first time, and I like, if I walked down Trondheim back then,
Mm-hmm.
the streets in Trondheim, if I saw a black person, it kind of stuck out,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then I went to US, and I went to Atlanta, a church there called Blood and Fire.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to the poor areas and gave out food and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember on the church service, like, we stood on a line and all the people that were poor came in and they got free food and stuff like that. And I was asked if I wanted to just stand up there and give hugs to everyone. And I'd never seen so many black people.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is a totally different culture, totally different country, and stuff like that. So it's something about being used to. And for example, my grandparents, they died a few years ago. They lived in another small community, about the same population, 1,500 people. They had grown up for 60 years. They had barely seen any black and they never traveled around Norway much. They traveled in Trøndelag. I don't know even if they've been to Sweden.
Wow. So very isolated existence.
Very isolated. Yeah. And I think that it's important that we don't judge that. Because
but isn't it also important that we allow ourselves to move into a new era? I get it. I can say, I'm not unreasonable. I understand what you're saying. I can remember when I first came to, we have a place up in Finnmark. Yeah. And those are the most beautiful people in Norway, if you ask me. And I remember the first time I was up there, my wife and I were in a grocery store, and this little kid, maybe 4 years old, was looking up at me, and he says, Hvorfor er du så mørk? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Why are you so dark, for those of you who don't understand Norwegian? And it was cute. It was a kid who was curious because he had never seen a black man before. So and there's nothing offensive about that. There's nothing wrong with that kid. I understand that. But what I don't understand is people our age, I'm probably a lot older. I am a lot older than you.
How old are you?
I'm 54.
Not that much older.
Black don't crack.
No.
You told me how old are you?
45.
45, yeah. True story. No, but I'm wondering, when people our age and teenagers and up to our age, and even maybe 10 years older than us, I'm wondering, where is the feeling of a threat from immigration among those people? I know it exists to some degree, but it's a small degree. My point is I can't get into I don't understand that narrative that immigration to Norway is a threat, because most people in Norway do not think it's a threat, justifiably so, because immigration to Norway is not this wave of people who are coming here trying to change your society.
Well,
I'm just wondering where it comes from.
One thing I think it's one thing is just to change the way that it looks, and then it easily becomes
change the way what looks.
The population in Norway, for example, like, and this is one thing that I see. U.S. gets criticism for being racist, and some European countries. I've never heard criticism, for example, Japan being racist. Or China.
I lived in Japan. Japan does get a rep for being racist. They do.
On the scale, when we talk about racism, we never talk about those countries.
No, because they don't have the same kind of history. No country has the same racial history as the United States. That's why the U.S. is always at the top of racist countries.
But U.S. has a unique history with it. They're all immigrants.
Yeah.
Europe is not that in the same way. We have a predominant white population, and it's and like for example, like I would never like I go like I've traveled quite a bit around the world. When I went to Tonga, for example, everyone looked at me. I've been to India. Everyone looks at me. I'm a white
Sure, you
person,
stand
right?
out.
Yeah.
Sure.
And people that are there, they may trust me less because I don't look the way they
Mm.
are. I don't view that as racism. I view that as I'm just different.
Sure.
And I also think that it's totally fair, for example, for Japan, they don't want to have too much white people in there so that they don't lose the uniqueness of because we're unique. Like I love different cultures. I love the
Sure.
black population, I love the Asian population, I love the white population. And I think that it's something beautiful in that too. And I'm not against interracial marriage, for
Mm.
example, not at all. But I hope that in 5 generations from now, we don't have any distinction. That there's no black people. There's
Yeah.
just like milquetoast people, or
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
so. There's nothing racial about that. It's like I appreciate the uniqueness of each.
And that's great that you feel that way. But I think, we talk about the political party FRP here in Norway. I think one of the things that they do that's irresponsible is they don't carefully approach the issue of the so-called watering down of the Norwegian culture, if we can use that term. They'll jump on it in this harsh way that makes people who have tendencies towards being radical and being racist, they make those people think, yeah, that political party is speaking for me. No to race mixing, no to immigration, no to black people.
But
And those are the people who, when I'm walking down the street, minding my business and smiling as I do, those are the ones that look at me
yeah.
and say the kind of things that they say. Those are the people that keep me and people like me from being able to buy a house where we want. That happened to me on 3 different occasions. I'm fine now. I'm doing my thing and life is great. But there was a time when I first came here where my wife and I could not buy a house on 3 different occasions because of the color of my skin. And those people who did those things did it because of that poisonous and ugly. See, you and I are talking, and that's great. But what about the poison that these politicians put out there to feed that ugly beast called racism and radicalism?
I agree with you, and I think, but the problem there is that is why I don't like political debates, because political debates is like you're taking a very big subject and you have 5 minutes talking about it. So you're talking in headlines.
And which makes me not understand why politicians don't come on podcasts and get their views out there clearly,
but
with an hour-long format, for example.
But you see that now, for example, with RFK Jr.
Yeah.
He has gone on Joe Rogan. He has gone on Jordan Peterson and stuff like that. And you get a feel of him as a person and you go into depth. And I think because that's why when I talk about politics, I actually like to more talk about what are the principles you believe in.
Yeah.
That, okay, this is a foundation, and out from that foundation, I make my views.
Right.
And because, for example, like I'm very critical of the welfare state.
Mm-hmm.
I could say that and say like, well, and that's a headline.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of philosophy behind that. Why am I that?
Yeah. There's a lot of nuance.
There's a lot of nuance. And like, so I think that is something that media has also kind of created.
Yes.
And so it's a
willfully.
dirty
willfully.
game.
It wasn't an accident either.
No, and
they've done it willfully.
And it's a dirty game. So therefore, but back to like your experience for not getting a house, and I think this is important because I listened to one of your podcasts where you said that you felt like there was kind of racism when you walked on the street and stuff like that. Well, my wife, she's Canadian. She is from British descent, so she looks like Norwegian. You couldn't put her up on like a stand and say, well, she's not Norwegian. She looks white and everything like that. She came to a small community. Everyone knew because everyone knows everyone.
Sure. Yeah.
And she walked into a store, and the person there, the woman working there, she was afraid to speak English,
Yeah.
and she hid when my wife came into the store.
Yeah.
Well, we think that she was afraid to
Yeah.
be speak English.
Mhm.
If you were black, it would be easy to say that, well, it's probably because she's a racist.
Yeah, but see, when people say that, people are assuming that black people don't understand nuance, and they're trying to assume, or they are assuming that black people don't understand how
Well,
to decipher given situations. You know, if someone did something, I can tell you this. I've only spoken out, outside of my wife, on my podcast when it comes to the racism that I've experienced. So it's not as if I'm looking for racism, because most people are not racist. Most of my encounters with Norwegians has gone beautiful. I love living here. It's a great place. However, when I mention something that was racism, it was racism. For example, not being able to buy a house. I don't know if you know the whole story. I don't know if you see. Yeah, what happened? On the surface, when I just say, I couldn't buy a house because I'm black. A lot of Norwegians, that skepticism will get turned on.
Of course.
But listen to this. Well, and you say, of course, and I say, sadly. Because and this is a little side thing. I'm going to get back to the story of what happened with buying a house. But I say sadly, not of course, but sadly, most Norwegians will become skeptical immediately. Because in a position of superiority in numbers, superiority in control, in other words, you guys are the majority. This is your country. Yeah. And from that position, I wish there was more understanding for what the non-ethnic Norwegian minority experiences. I wish there was less of that skepticism.
But then now, one question there.
Sure.
Like we have, most people, they have their own lives.
Yeah.
They have enough with their own lives.
Absolutely.
And even looking at news, it's like, okay, there's a famine in Africa, or there's an earthquake in US, or there's fires in Hawaii.
Or floods in Hokksund.
Yeah, stuff like that. There's only so much that you can bring in. And when you raise kind of, and this is one thing that I find not very healthy, I think. It's like when my experience becomes, it's the biggest thing. And for example, and in my life, it is a big thing.
Sure.
But for me to kind of put down others, you don't see the seriousness in this, what I'm going through. Mm-hmm. It becomes like, well, you're not that important. Like, that's like.
But I'm not. That's and that's not what I'm proposing. I'm proposing just more understanding.
But like, how many people can we understand? There's thousands of people.
Do you not have a responsibility to as citizens? Don't we have a responsibility to understand each other? That's what brings about harmony in a society.
But only in the people. For example, like growing up in Singsås, my responsibility is to understand my neighbors.
Sure, absolutely.
Not everyone that lives in Oslo. And because like there's 5 million people in Norway. There's 5 million people that have their own unique experience of life.
I will amend what I said. Maybe it's not your responsibility to understand every citizen. However, if presented with an opposing viewpoint, isn't there a responsibility to at least understand, if not agree, at least understand? That is part of a working society. That makes a society function, is a commonality of understanding.
I think that. But when we have a conversation, it's my heart to try to understand you. But
and that's what I'm talking about. Isn't that a universal thing, or shouldn't it be a universal thing?
Totally. But what should be and what is often very far apart.
Absolutely.
And the thing is
that's reality.
If we put on the should on people, you should understand the immigrants. Well, I don't have any immigrants friends, for example. If that was like, then it's like, well, why do you bother me? Because I was fine. Like I'm talking this is not me.
No, you're talking in generality.
So if someone have been, for example, my grandparents, they lived a small life.
Mm-hmm.
They love their family. They work super hard. They were born before the war, so they lived
Mm-hmm.
through the war, and they've had very little money. They work super hard,
Mm-hmm.
and they have been great people. But it would be very easy for someone that is very like um, um, very concerned about, for example, racism. It would be very easy to kind of blame them. Well, you don't love.
Yeah, but I think you're missing some nuance. Like when you say someone who is very occupied with racism, or things along that line. I'm very occupied with racism, but I'm not. I'm occupied with it in the sense that I experience it and that I wish it would go away. So I do work towards that end of exposing racism, educating people about racism, mentoring people who are both victims and propagators of racism. And that's not a bad thing. And there's no judgment on my end. I think most people who are supposedly preoccupied with racism are not judgmental. Of course, there's some here in Norway who just make blank statements. Norway is racist.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. That does not foment a good dialogue.
Like for example, I have quite a few friends that are not from Norway. My wife is not from Norway. She's white though, but I have black friends. I have gone to India and Tonga, and where it's predominantly other cultures with other people. But I have, for example, I would be hated to be called a racist. And I think, for example, if you're called a racist, you have stopped the dialogue.
Yeah.
Because then you have painted a person so bad. And for example, when you say that, well, there's a lot of racism in Norway, it's the thing with that is that it's easily come up, well, don't you dare come and tell me I'm a racist.
Yeah, but by saying there's a lot of racism in Norway, that's not calling you a racist or anyone a racist. That's just stating a fact. There is racism in Norway.
But that is like, for example, if I come into your house and say, well, this house is dirty.
Actually, it is.
Well, but
if you go on the other side of that wall, it's pretty crappy over there.
But the thing is that
I get what you're saying. I do.
You don't want to be blamed for something because you're fine with like when I had small kids. Yeah, I was fine with my house not being up to par all the time.
Sure.
But if someone pointed that out and it's true, I would like, who the hell are you that you blame me?
Yeah, but see, anyone who discusses racism or who works or claims to work against racism, if they come with an accusatory tone, they're not someone who is very educated in the ways of dialogue.
I find most people that, for example, especially on the left in the US, like the CRT and stuff, like critical race theory and stuff,
which doesn't exist in high schools in America.
Well, that's a difference of opinion. But
no, that's a fact. We'll get to that.
Well, I haven't studied it enough. But
I have.
Yeah, but the thing
so is you have to trust me then when I say that.
But the thing is that, well, you can say, well, it's not CRT, but if the message you give is that, well, there's a lot of racism, that's one of the big, and for example,
is that not true?
But the thing, like, my point is that, for example, look at this. If I told you, look around this room and look everything that's red, look at everything that's red. Then close your eyes and tell me what is green.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you focus, look at everything as red, you see everything as red.
But I understand what you're doing. I understand what you're doing, and that's an excellent philosophical line of argument to take. But I don't think that is the reality, because that line of philosophical statement and argument or defense or attack within a debate doesn't reflect the reality, because using that in the context of discussions about race and racism is to assume that we who bring up the discussion don't understand nuance. Who bring up the discussion don't, because to close your eyes and then not understand that there's enough green, I get that. Yeah. But that doesn't really apply.
But the thing is that, for example, Martin Luther King Jr. said, I have a dream that one day, right, that my children will not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of the character. Yeah. What I've seen in the US is that there has been a reversal. There's a lot more focus, especially amongst the left, on color, race,
Do you know why?
But it doesn't matter why.
Oh, it does, but it
but
does, my friend.
but
It does matter why. I have to interrupt you. It matters because it's a shame that things are still not equal. The playing field is not level.
It depends.
Not in America, and also not here in Norway. And as long as it's unlevel, the discussion must be had. Otherwise, there will be no change.
But then I'll take a story.
And then I want to get back to my story about what happened to me about not being able to buy a house, hopefully to explain to anyone who rolls their eyes and doesn't understand. Hopefully they'll understand that this was racism that kept me from buying a house. But go ahead, please.
You probably know the story about, like, have you heard about, what's his name? He's like one of the biggest economists, black person, Sowell.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Uncle Sowell. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like he, and I've heard it from more than him. I haven't studied myself, but I trust, so I haven't fact checked or whatever. But he said, like, up until the black population in the US started, because you had a history of slavery, the white population started higher when it comes to economic standards.
Of course.
And then the gap decreased up until 1967 or in the 60s. And then you had LBJ. He came in with like the war and poverty or something like that. And then he went into certain areas on especially black communities and said, like, well, if you guys have a father in the house, we expect the father to provide. But if you're a single mom, we will help the mom. So we will pay. Up until then, there was less black kids that grew up without a dad than white kids. And but since then, more and more black people, because it was especially towards them, like the welfare program, more and more black people ended up without a dad in their home.
And why is that?
Because the government came in and said, well, if you have a dad in the home, you have to provide for your family. But if you don't have a dad...
You think that's the reason why men disappeared from the black American family? So. You don't think that the so-called war on drugs, which was started in full effect by Nixon, you don't think that has anything to do with it? I'm sure, in other words, from the school to the prison, that pipeline.
But I'm sure that it's not one thing, but I think definitely that had an impact on it.
Sure. Undeniable.
Yeah. So the thing is, and like even Obama said, like, well, if you don't have a dad, the probability that you end up in jail is like 25 times more or something like that.
Yep.
So what is the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge is that there's broken up families. Yeah. So if that is the biggest challenge for the pay gap, and for example, if you heard about pay gap, for example, gender pay gap,
sure.
Listen to Jordan Peterson on that. Like if you go into the numbers of it, it's not really a pay gap at all.
Because he comes with the argument that women choose lower paying jobs, women choose to take time away with their children and whatnot. Jordan Peterson kind of lays that argument out there in an effective way. A lot of people run with that.
But I totally agree with it because, for example, my wife, she's a career woman. And she says, like, what I don't like about the freedom of women is that we got the same rights as men and more rights than men, because like a man doesn't get, well, in Norway we get like baby pay now, but we didn't used to get that. It was only women that got that, like to get paid for staying at home.
But that was under the assumption that it was the woman who stayed home. I stayed home for 9 months with our daughter.
I know, but like most and the most psychologists, because you can't breastfeed. I'm sorry, you have a big chest, but you can't breastfeed.
There's no milk in these.
No. So the thing is that there's, my wife said, like, well, it was great that we got rights, but when we got those rights, we didn't really sign up for that. We lost the opportunity to choose to stay home with kids, because it's like in Norway now, it's almost no possibility to, you both have to work.
Unfortunately, it's become that way.
Yes. And one of the reasons for that is like, that's why, for example, like when I talk about left and right, and we can talk about the differences, the big differences between left and right, like philosophically. But
Sure.
one of the differences that I think that is left and right is that left often has good intentions, but the long-term fruit of it is really bad.
And the same could be said about the right. The same could be, I mean, you could just make a blanket statement, which in this case I think would be justifiable, is that political decisions, whether they come from the left or the right, very often are just looking at the short term and not paying enough attention to totally the long term. But I need to push back on something. Enjoy that coffee, man. That's some good organic stuff right there. I've been drinking regular store-bought coffee for the last month or so, and then here today I busted out the organic, and boy, do I taste the difference, man. But I want to push back against something that you seemed to overlook. Forgive me if I'm wrong. There are policies that have been put in place, and some of them are still in place in America, that play a humongous role in the situation concerning the absence of Black fathers at home and the income disparity between Black families and white families. One thing is, and what's his name? Eric Sowell. Eric, I think is his first name, Sowell, talked about only half of the story when it comes to the economic journey of Black people and who is at fault. And he says primarily it's Black people themselves who are at fault. My pushback is there's a whole part of history, several parts of history that are being ignored in that evaluation of the economic state of Black Americans. We can go back to 1921, for example, and several occurrences just a little bit before and a little after.
Just one thing, what you're probably saying now, I probably won't know, so I won't be able to.
That's okay. I just want to put it out there for the viewers and for the listeners. Well, let me ask you: have you heard of the Tulsa massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1921? I can tell you what happened very briefly.
Wasn't that like a few young kids were hanged or something?
Oh, no. Let me tell you.
Okay.
After slavery, after the Civil War and after slavery, Black people rose up economically. Not all of them, but many of us did. Black people started to do well. White people in the South didn't like that. Everybody knows about the Ku Klux Klan, and not everybody knows about the reason for the Ku Klux Klan existing. They exist because basically of Southern white jealousy of the progress of Black people, and they were founded to do everything they could to suppress and terrorize Black people. That was the beginning of a process that slowly and sometimes quickly, suddenly, and permanently took wealth, land, assets and possessions, and cash out of Black hands. And that started almost immediately after slavery, when Black people started to actually climb up. In spite of that, we can fast forward to several places all over the South and the Midwest, in this case, Tulsa, where Black people established businesses, communities that were quite wealthy, much, much more wealthy than surrounding exclusively white communities. Tulsa, Oklahoma became known as the Black Wall Street.
Yeah, that I heard about.
Tulsa, Oklahoma, lots of wealth there. And you would think 1921 is both a long time ago, but not that long ago. Yeah. And what happened was jealousy, racism, again, bubbled to the top. A posse was put together and they burned Black Wall Street to the ground, killed a lot of Black people in that process. More than just a few boys, they killed a lot of people, hundreds. And every business was burned to the ground in Black Wall Street. That is actually the first time an American military plane was used to bomb civilians. They pulled in a biplane and they dropped bombs on some of these buildings. It's all easily verifiable. For the YouTubers who say that I'm always talking shit, just look it up. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street.
You have a lot of
Tulsa,
YouTubers saying that.
I kind of like it though. At the same time as they criticize, they must be watching, I guess. So thank you.
Yeah.
So when you think about that an entire community, a sub society, if you will, and I say sub only to describe it as being separate from the mainstream white society of the time, not by their choice, but by the choice of the racist majority in that area of the United States. When all of that was wiped out, think of the wealth that was taken out of black hands. Now, this is just one incident. Take several incidences from that and go back maybe another 20, 30, 40 years and go forward another 20, 30, 40 years and think about all of, I can also get into how black farmers have lost hundreds of thousands of acres. If we translate into the Norwegian measurement for land, mål, hundreds of millions of mål that has been taken from them by illegal means. It's all easily documented. So when you look at all of this generational wealth that has been taken out of the hands of black families, is it any wonder? Is it the fault of, I'll say this, what is more proper and to focus on? Is it that it's black people's fault that they don't have wealth these days? Or is it more proper and enlightening and unifying to say that, wow, in spite of all of the dozens of incidences like the Tulsa massacre, the massacre and the burning down of Black Wall Street, in spite of that, there are black people like myself who are financially successful. There are black families who have generational wealth. So it's a narrative thing. For some reason, Mr. Sowell chooses to go here. It's black people's fault that they don't have proper economy, that they're lagging behind white folks, and that they have no generational wealth. He ignores this large segment of American history, thereby putting a narrative out there that is easily consumed, no offense, but by people like you who are consumers of American news.
You know me already.
Consumers of, we're going to get to that, but consumers of American news. And believe me, there's nothing wrong with that. But I want people to have the whole story. That narrative that Eric Sowell puts out. And I think it's funny that a lot of white people in America and a lot of followers of American news outside of America, specifically here in Norway, will pull out somebody like Eric Sowell as if, come on, John, this black man is right. What's wrong with you, John? I'm sorry, Thomas. Is it?
Thomas Sowell.
Yeah, you see how much I listen to what he's doing. Thomas Sowell is his name. Sorry, I've been saying Eric this whole time.
But like, for example, Eric.
Do you see what I'm saying? He's leaving out an entire segment of history, and that's important.
But one thing, I heard Dennis Prager, do you know him?
Yeah.
He said, like he was on like a biblical teaching with Jordan Peterson, and he said, and this it has nothing to do with racism and stuff like that. This is on a general thing, and I think this is important. He said the biggest difference between religious education and a non-religious education is that in a religious education, the biggest problem in your life is you. And in a non-religious education, the biggest problem in life is racism, inequality, whatever, like all these things. And let me point out
and
this.
Prager said that.
Yeah, Prager said that.
A white guy who doesn't experience racism. I'm just going to put that out there.
But he's a Jew. He's a Jew.
I love my Jewish brothers and sisters. I have Jewish people in my family, but let's not get it twisted.
No, but let's, like, if there's a population that has experienced more persecution, more killing than any other population
up through history, it is the Jewish population. Yes. But if we're talking about American history, it is the American black man.
Well, like Jews. Well, in a world scale,
am I wrong? Yeah, but okay, but if we're talking about American politics, you brought up Prager. That's American politics there.
Yeah, but my point is that if my view is my life is hard because of someone else did to me, it has taken away all first it has taken away the power for me to change it.
Yeah, but where's your nuance? Cannot both be true? That I could not buy a house because of racism, but I also have some responsibility in that how I reacted to that. And I'll tell you the story and things like that. What cannot both be true?
Yes,
you're speaking in absolutes.
No.
If someone hollers out about racism, that doesn't mean that's the only issue.
Of course, both can be true. But the thing is that if you focus too much on the problems out there, it takes away, because, for example, like...
Yeah, but how much is too much? There are problems out there. Again,
of course.
If we don't have discussions like this, which I love, and okay, let me just take a little sidetrack here. On my show, I've only had one Republican, you could say one person from the right side of politics on my show, and that was my brother Austin Rasmussen. So you're number two. Yeah. So my viewers and listeners may not be used to this kind of discussion, but we are just discussing, and I think this is a great way to discuss this thing. So I just want to say that as an aside to my viewers and listeners. We don't agree on some things, but I think you and I agree on most things. I really do.
Totally.
I just wanted to put that out there.
I would like to, for example, like take welfare. And I find that as an interesting thing because it brings out a great point, because both the left and the right has usually they want to take care of the poor. Okay, yeah. So let's say that we agree on taking care of the poor.
Not really. Republicans don't give a crap.
Well,
but go ahead.
No, the thing is that
I like to have proof that they do care.
Okay,
I'd like to have proof of that.
But the thing is that well, I'll come to that. I think that my answer will answer that point.
Sure.
The difference between, for example, the welfare state and Jesus's teaching, and I'm a very strong believer in the Bible, and I'm a Christian.
As am I.
And most of like the founders in the U.S. were Christians, and the most quoted book in the Bible, you should listen to. What is wall builders? They're called. He's viewed as the biggest constitutional expert, and he has the biggest personal library of original text from the founding of U.S.
Okay.
It's called Wall Builders. I don't remember his name now. But the thing is that the difference between, for example, sorry, I'm gonna turn off my phone here. The biggest difference between Jesus says no, or the welfare says state says that as a poor person you have the right for the welfare state to take care of you. In like, if you take away the welfare state, it's basically saying the poor has right to be provided by the rich.
Yeah.
Right. In Christianity, there's nothing like that. It's the Christians' it's the wealthy's responsibility to take care of the poor, but it's never the poor's right to get from the rich. And both end up, and let me take this, both end up taking care of the poor. But one thing, it is my right for you to give to me. The other one, I have no rights of you, but it's
you mean no right to demand.
No. Exactly.
Yeah.
I have no right to demand from you that you're going to take care of me. But when you do out from the willingness of your heart, it's going to fill my heart with gratefulness.
Oh, absolutely. I believe that as well.
And the thing is that welfare state, for example, I've heard many quote this. I don't know where they find it from, but I do believe it. That, like, if you have seen the difference between right and left in the U.S., the left are having policies that wants the poor to be taken care of, but it's always through the poor's right to take from the rich in a way, or the right to get from the rich. On the right side, they don't want that at all. But the people that vote right, often in average, and you can say, well, they're richer, but in average, they are giving a lot more of their own time. For example, like the politicians that are for like sanctuary cities, the Democrats. And then you had some politicians, well, we'll send them to you, or we'll send them to Martha's Vineyard. We'll send them to your place. No, we don't want them here.
That's not true. That's not true. I don't know what narrative you're listening to, but the fact is that people like Ron DeSantis, listen to me, please. Ron DeSantis and Governor Abbott from Texas are just blankly sending immigrants, lying to them, first of all, and saying that they're going to be taken care of and this, that, and the other, but then just putting them on a bus and sending them blindly to Martha's Vineyard, for example. But that, hold on a second, that is politicizing the issue at the expense, the grave expense of these poor immigrants and asylum seekers who are being used as pawns. And I don't see anything Christ-like in that. I don't see any, and that has nothing to do with, and hold on a second, and I don't think we can exclude human rights.
No, but what is a human right? Because, for example, the Bible, according to the Bible, if you don't want to work, you should not eat, the Bible says. So is food a human right if you don't work?
The Bible also shows several examples of Jesus and his disciples feeding the poor.
Yes, but we're totally. But the whole point is that there's a difference between whose responsibility is it. My right to get food from the rich?
I wish it didn't have to be a poor person's right to get food from the rich, but maybe it needs, not maybe, I believe it needs to be a right, because we have too many examples of the rich, and some of them so-called Christians, doing very un-Christ-like things to the detriment of the poor.
I'm totally like.
Thereby, we have a society that has made a series of elections and choices, which then put in place a series of laws to protect the rights of the poor.
But
I wish it wasn't necessary, but there's too many people who are not living a Christ-like existence, and that makes laws like that. That makes laws like that. That makes amendments to the American Constitution necessary to protect the rights of people.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, but you said that there's a problem with people feeling that they have a right to food or housing.
Yes, because
I can't get that to mix.
No, because the thing is that, for example, in the Old Testament, you had kind of a welfare state. And the welfare state there is that for example, if you were a landowner and you took in your food or you took in your crop, you should leave something on the side of the field so the poor could come there and pick themselves.
But now you're saying should, which you're hinting that there is a right of those poor people to have it. You said should.
Yes.
But you jumped on me a little while ago when I said that there should be things to protect the poor.
The difference is the rich person should leave something on the side of their field.
Yeah. In modern times, that's called taxes, paying taxes.
No, it should leave something on the right of the field.
And in modern times, that's called paying taxes.
No, but listen.
Yeah.
You just didn't take in all the crop.
Right. You didn't keep all of your money. You paid taxes. I'm just putting it in a modern context. But go ahead, please.
It was the right. It was not the poor person's right to get, like, for example, well, I want the rich to come here with the food. No, I had to go out. I had to gather.
I get it.
I had to do it. There was opportunity to get it.
I understand.
But that. So what I'm for is opportunity for everyone.
Which is not in place in America today.
Fine. And there's a lot of stuff like that you can say that there, because that's why like we talked on the phone here, the hard thing today to talk about, for example, specific issues is that you have your sources and I have more sources and they don't agree on the facts at all. For example, like I'll take an example. I listened to the inauguration speech of Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was some of the most amazing thing I've ever heard. I was like sitting, hallelujah. And then I read VG the day after, and they said, well, this is...
VG is a Norwegian national syndicated newspaper.
Yeah. I read VG the day after, and I was like, this is... it's a ghastly thing from the 30s, like saying that it was the same as Hitler.
But I don't think they're saying there's a difference in facts. They're interpreting those facts differently. Because I also listened to his speech and I thought it was horrid.
I thought it was amazing.
I thought it was scary.
I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, see, but that's not a difference in facts. That's a difference in the interpretation of
No,
facts. And that happens because we all have different backgrounds,
Yes,
sometimes drastically different.
Yes, but for example, if, for example, you didn't listen to the speech and you read Breitbart on that speech and you read VG on that speech and you got their interpretation of you because you didn't listen to the thing yourself.
I guess it's different for me as a podcaster and a program producer and journalist. I look at both sides of things. I choose what I believe and in which direction to go. Part of that is because of my background. Part of that is because of my own experiences. Part of that is my gathering of experiences from others throughout the type of work that I've done my entire adult life. Part of that is, it's all of those things that cause us to interpret the same set of facts in different ways. And I think that's allowed.
Yeah,
and
totally.
There is hopefully more of a meeting of the minds by more discussions like this, which I don't think happens often enough. Like I said, you're only the second person to come on my program who's from the right.
I would like to, because
right side of politics.
Like when we said, like, for example, the welfare, like the rights of the poor and the responsibility of the rich, both the right and left there have a common goal that the poor should be taken care of.
Yeah, but there's where we disagree. I do not believe that today's Republican Party has the interests of poor people in mind.
But
I'd like proof that they do.
But let's, for example, like, we probably disagree on the facts here too, but all the numbers I've heard is that under President Trump, for example, there was less unemployment amongst Black people. There was less unemployment amongst women.
There's less unemployment now for Black people and women than there were under Trump.
Okay.
Fact.
Okay.
Fact.
But the thing is that when you see a lot of the people I've listened to, like conservative Black people, they say that Trump's policies were great for the people. You may not like him as a person. And so what I would like to do, because we are not going to, for example, agree on Trump or Biden or whatever, but like, what do you think are the biggest difference between left and right when it comes to the foundational worldview or the foundational principles? What do you think? For example, freedom of speech used to be something that was the left's, like they were standing and proclaiming that. Now you have hate speech, and now you have, for example, the left, they're talking a lot more about, well, yes, we're for free speech, but not that speech.
Like what, for example? Because I think some of the things that the right has brought up as a trampling of free speech is not that.
Well,
I don't agree with the narrative that the left is less pro free speech than the right.
Well, for example, like after the war, this is free speech according to Dennis Prager. He lived in a small community. It was a community that was predominantly Jew. This was right after the Second World War, and there was neo-Nazis there, and they walked down the street with the swastikas and stuff like that, and they were not arrested. If something is, if anything is hate speech or whatever, that would be definitely.
That's an example of it. Absolutely.
But the freedom of speech was so strong that they had the right to do it. They had the right to be protested against, but they had the right to do it. So
but if you're using that as a barometer of free speech, well, free speech is just as solidly in place today because there's a lot of neo-Nazis marching around. And in fact, they did it just a few months ago right outside of my hometown in the next town over, Wadsworth. Neo-Nazis, swastikas and everything, they weren't arrested.
But what is...
They weren't arrested.
Like...
Charlottesville,
but what
a few years ago at the beginning of Trump's presidency, they were allowed to protest and say all those horrible things. They weren't arrested.
But what do you think is the biggest difference between left and right when it comes to basic worldview? Like what the principles that is built upon? Because we're not going to agree on the facts, but what are the principles that differ?
Yeah, but we do agree on the facts. We just interpret them differently. Okay. I don't think you think there's a whole nother set of facts. I know about, I don't listen to Thomas Sala. As you see, I was getting his name wrong for a half hour. I kept calling him Eric, but I am familiar with his work and his statements. So I know what he's about. I just think he's wrong.
Yeah.
So we're not.
What do you
we're not.
think? What do you think are the biggest difference between left and right when it comes to worldview and principles, philosophical principles?
It's kind of hard to break it down into philosophical terms because I don't think either party does anything from a philosophical standing point. I think both parties, to a large degree, are whichever direction they're looking has a lot with financing. It has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Um,
But what do you think should, like, if you think about,
If I think traditional left,
yes,
I'm thinking workers' rights, traditional.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking traditional right, I'm thinking individual rights.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking traditional left, I'm thinking.
So it would left be more like community and right more individual then?
That's a both, as you would say in Norway, both og. It's a yes and no situation, because Republicans, if you think about community, Republicans cannot stand the federal government or even the state government often. They're more looking at almost a libertarian type of local government type of thing. So on one hand, you would think Republicans are anti-establishment.
Yeah.
But if you break it down to a local level, they are almost fanatically. Just look at how a lot of Republican school boards are acting. That is very much community based. So you would, in that instance, Republicans are very community oriented.
Well, I think that has been a backlash just the last few years, at least as my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it has been
since Trump was president. Yes.
Well, even after the last 3 years.
Yeah, but I'm saying since and up until now, since Trump was president and still going on today.
Because it has been a domain on the left a lot.
Yeah.
So it's maybe now it's more like equal. It used to
but
be the domain
they exercise that focus on community in two different ways. I believe that Democrats, from what I see, are more when they think of community, they're thinking of more inclusion. Republicans, when they're thinking of community, they're thinking more exclusionary. In other words, we have our thing here. You people need to stay out.
But like when you see,
and that's just so that's what I'm saying. Hold on a second. That's why I'm saying both parties or both spectrums of the political spectrum, left and right, are in many ways similar in that they are very fluid, depending on finances, depending on the topic of the day.
Like
depending on election cycles.
Yeah, if you look at the political landscape, like from left to right, I would say like extreme left is totalitarianism in my view.
I would say totalitarian communism, because you have totalitarian fascism over here.
But the fascism, remember, like or Nazism, were the National Socialistic Party.
But that socialistic thing was only in name. Just like before, like 70 years ago, Democrat meant racist Southern.
Yeah.
Whereas today, Republican means racist Southern. So terms change over the years. And that's the same thing with that socialist thing in the Nazi Socialist Party.
But one thing. Okay.
Is very right wing.
I'm pushing
the Nazis were not left wing. we agree on that, correct?
But it depends on how you define it, right wing or left wing.
Let me ask you today. Who supports Nazism? Leftists or right wingers?
I think it's extremely few that support Nazism.
I agree with you, but among those who support Nazism, are they on the right side or the left?
I would say that they're crazy, and I don't.
So would I, but are they on the right or on the left? Come on, man. Hans Jakob, you can say this. It's okay. You can say it. It's right side. I'll answer for you, and you tell me I'm wrong. It's the right side of the political spectrum that supports Nazism. So thereby, if you go to the socialist, if you go to that socialist word in the Nazi Socialist Party from World War II, that's why that doesn't really apply in today's political spectrum.
Let me say this, and this is where I find a lot of people talk past each other because we don't agree on the definition of words. Like if you define left as totalitarianism, extreme left, and right, extreme right, as not Nazism, but what do you call it? When you don't have any laws. Anarchy.
Yeah.
If you view that like this is extreme individual, this is extreme community. Then
left and right. So where did the Nazi Party of World War II fall on your spectrum?
Well, they are totally. They were not individualists. They were totally for a They were totalitarian.
But on the right.
Well, depends on how you define right and left.
Okay, well, how did the Nazi Party have anything to do with what the Russian Communist Party was doing? You agree that the Russian Communist Party was totalitarian left.
Yes.
But are you saying that there's no such thing as a totalitarian right? Is that what you're saying? Just asking.
It depends on how you define it, because if you define it as individual on the right and community on the left, we need both, by the way. We need the individual rights and we need the community.
It is individuals that make up the community. Absolutely. Yes. And it's the community that affects the lives of the individual. Absolutely. Hand in hand.
Yes, and it's also the individual that affects the life of the community.
Absolutely. Yeah, hand in hand.
So, so that's where, for example, if you define, that's why, for example, like I would define FRP as on the right, because they're the most libertarian. Yeah. They're the most individualistic.
Agreed.
Then I would define Rødt.
The Red Party.
Yeah. Yes, the ones on the left, because they're the most communal, or they're most like top-down rulership. This is individual rulership. Yeah. When you take that aspect of it, then I'm a lot further on the right. And then we talked on the phone. I think that we all have the need for security, and we all have the need for freedom.
Yeah.
The foundational value of the US, and I think a lot has changed after 60s, 70s and stuff like that, but at least the foundation, like for example, like everyone that went from Norway to the US in the 1800s, there were no security. There were only possibility.
Yes.
There was a possibility, but there was no security whatsoever. You could die on the ship. You could die of fever. You could die by Indians. You could die by anything, right? Yeah. But there was a possibility. There was an opportunity. Yeah. The whole U.S., everyone that came there 200 years ago, except the slaves, but everyone else that immigrated freely to there were no security. Only
plenty of opportunity. Yes, absolutely.
And that is the foundation of the U.S. that I love.
But do you know what makes that foundation shaky? You said it yourself, except for the slaves.
Okay.
And that is something that still needs to be dealt with. See, look, to talk about that thing being something that needs to be dealt with does not mean that the one who is speaking about it, in this case me, is looking for a handout. What we are looking for is justice, and to ignore that in the conversation is wild. That's wild to me.
But then for me, for example, like the Jews, like we talked about Jews, they were 6 million Jews died only 60, 70 years ago.
Yep.
Slavery ended like a longer time ago. And there's still a lot of anti-Semitism in the US and in the world today.
Yep.
So like, because what I am,
so what you're saying then is black people need to be more like the Jews, and come on, step it up, black folks, and get it. Is that what you're saying?
A little bit, yes.
Wow.
Or no, not about black people. Everyone.
Yeah, but we're talking about black people
No,
now.
but everyone that falls into a category where they view themselves as a victim.
Okay, but see, now that's that right-wing trope right there. To speak about racism and inequality and disparity in opportunity is to paint oneself or that group as a victim. That's just but because to not speak about it is to accept that lack of opportunity, to accept that racism, to accept that disparity.
But let me say this: I have had hardships in my life.
Sure, everyone has. Absolutely.
Yes. For example, my ears are a little outstanding, right? So
I think you're a handsome guy.
Thank you.
Ears and all.
I grew into my ears.
I love it.
But when I was a teenager, my ears, I look like a monkey, right? Mm-hmm. They were standing right out. My best friend said, like, do you know what, Hans Jakob? Because I was quite fit as a teenager. You know, Hans Jakob, you could have done really well on the 100-meter slash if you didn't have your flaps out.
Wind resistance.
Yeah. But imagine, and that is something I'm born with, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if there were 100 of us that were teased by the same thing, by the community.
Yeah.
It would be easy to, if we talk too much about it and stuff like that, it would be easy.
But I asked you before when you said something about that too much focus. How much is too much? Because again, I think you're missing the whole element of nuance. You're talking as if to talk about these things, inequality, racism, is
But
to
let's
paint oneself as a victim.
But
How about talking about it? And again,
but how do we move forward from it?
By talking about it and agreeing that that it's an issue, first of all.
Okay, but what about my ears? Should I make everyone agree that
if you're born with it? Yeah, but no, you're wrong. I don't think this is a good, and I rarely say that someone is wrong, but I think you're wrong because you're trying to make this analogy. There's no similarities. There's no foundation to where a solid analogy can be made about a physical characteristic and a socioeconomic characteristic of a nation that can be fixed through awareness, dialogue and discussion, and a new set of laws. You can't fix your ears, but you can certainly fix the economic and socio disparities in the United States. You can certainly do that.
What okay.
Am I wrong? Do you think it can't be fixed?
Yes, okay, I think that it can be. Okay. Only the individual can fix their own life. For example, we have for example, why are the Jews still today pretty well off when they lost everything 70 years ago?
I don't compare the plight of European Jews during World War II. I don't compare that to the plight of Black Americans. I just don't.
But why are they doing okay?
Because What's your answer?
I think it has to do with culture.
Okay.
A lot of
so it's a culture. Are you saying then?
For example, the Jews.
The assumption of that is that there is a cultural flaw among Black Americans, and that is why we are still, to a certain degree, in the same position that we are in. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying.
Okay. Well, then please explain what you say then about it's a cultural thing.
For example, like values.
Mm-hmm.
If you like they have done like I heard about the research program here. They did the biggest predictor of if you're going to do well in life or not. Like they did like a research thing with kids.
Mm-hmm.
They had a lot of kids in the room and they gave them one marshmallow. I don't know if you heard about this thing. Yeah. They gave them one marshmallow and they said, well, you can eat the marshmallow, but if you wait half an hour,
mm-hmm.
I'll give you 3 more.
Yeah.
Most of the kids couldn't wait half an hour, mm-hmm. and they ate the marshmallow.
Delayed gratification is something that comes with age and life experience.
But the thing is that the kid that had already learned that did a lot better, and all life is about, well, if I delay my gratification now, I can get a better tomorrow.
And good parents teach their kid. Well, I shouldn't say that. The child who is taught that by their parents is a child that will, in general, do quite well.
Yes. So my point is, it's a family thing.
Yeah.
And of course, remember now, I'm not saying that there are certain people groups or certain people have bigger obstacles than others. I'm not saying that at all. My point is that we all have obstacles.
Sure. Yeah.
And you can be a white person and have bigger obstacles than a black person. You can be a black person but in average, you can say the black person has a bigger, but you always have to deal with the individual.
Of course. But again, to speak on these issues is not to sign away personal responsibility in any case.
But then I think that what I like with a lot of the black conservatives I listen to, what they are saying to their community is that, okay, there is hope. There is, you can get up if you do this, and this. For example, like they had done a predictor. Even if you grow up in very poor standard in the U.S., if you don't get kids before you're married, you finish high school, and you keep a job.
You do all those things, your life is you're going to have a good start.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And then
I don't think anybody disagrees on that.
But then if that is reality, if those 3 things, what should be our main focus then? It's to teach kids not to have sex and get kids outside marriage. It's to teach them to stay in school, and it's to teach them to delay gratification. So even though you hate your job, if you stick to it, you're going to get a better tomorrow.
Are you aware that most black families teach their children that?
No, but the point is, for example, like I'm a Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of it in the Bible that I wish that I lived according to, but I don't live it. It doesn't matter.
Perfect.
It doesn't matter what I espouse to. Is like, what do I actually live out? So if that is the thing, that if you do those three things, you're going to get a better life. You're going to get out of poverty.
Yeah, but not necessarily, because you're leaving out a few elements.
But if
you're leaving out some elements, some other factualities.
Oh, of course. But if that covers, say, 90% of people, if
it's
they
a good start.
If
Absolutely.
they do that, you're going to get out of poverty, right?
Yeah, but you're not necessarily. I say yes, but not necessarily.
But there's nothing in life that is necessarily. There's nothing in life that if I do A, B, C, I'm sure to get D.
The problem is that people on the right think that just about everybody, if you do this, you're going to be fine. And that's just not true. It's just not true.
But nothing is told true in because you can be.
I just asked that people on the right. Yes,
like
I know, but I just asked that people from the right pull it back. And we were talking about understanding. I think people on the right do not understand the problems of everyday people who, in most ways, are very similar to them. But they, being from the right, will create these barriers, this us and them type of thing. But I hear what you're saying. Hans Jakob, if people do this, that, and the other, then they are on a very good start. But I think you're also ignoring there are certain magnets in this world, in this life that we live, that pull circumstances away from what is just and correct and right.
100% agree.
Yeah, but I don't think you agree on everything, because you probably don't believe in structural racism.
Well,
systemic racism. Why is it, for example, that you talk about education and living your life, right?
Yeah,
you could be a hold a second. You could be a well-educated black man, college degree. Statistically in America, that educated black man is still going to be out-hired by a white convicted felon. Why is that? That's a fact. That is a statistical fact. You can look that up in the Census Bureau. All those numbers are there. It's the equivalent to Norway's statistics. Thank you. Yeah. I forgot what it's called, but it's the same thing. So I hope we can. We talk about differences in where we source our facts, but I think we can trust that. And why is that?
Well,
this guy has done these three things that you talked about, and yet.
But one thing that, for example, like you said, the thing from. The Black Wall Street in Tulsa. Mm-hmm. Okay. Were there mostly black people there?
They were all black people.
Okay. Why were there only black people there?
Racism.
So were the black people racist? Well, one thing.
Come on now.
No, do you think that black can be racist against white, or is it only white that can be racist?
In the United States of America, to me, racism is about power. I don't see black people having power over white people. I just don't see it.
Then we don't agree
on the
definition of racism.
Give me an example of a racist black
because
an individual.
For me, racism is if I think that you're less worth than me because of the color of the skin.
And there are black people who feel that about white people.
They are racist.
Of course. I'm talking on a systemic level, on a national systemic level. There is no black racism. There are black individual racists. Yes.
Okay.
But what does that have to do with Tulsa? You were talking about Tulsa.
Well, my point was that, for example,
1921.
Yeah. Why weren't there any white there? Or Japanese,
because
or
at
Asian,
that time,
or stuff like that.
At that time, America had laws in place to restrict, or at times I can't get my years straight, but I want to say at that time it was illegal for Chinese and Japanese to immigrate to America, and no white people wanted to live with a bunch of those blanks N-words back then.
Yeah, but
that's why there were no white people there.
Then another thing, I'll say, let's go to slavery.
Yeah.
Slavery has existed in all the world through all times.
Not chattel slavery.
What?
Chattel, Chattel.
What is that?
Shortly or briefly, I will tell you, chattel slavery is slavery for money, and
That has always been.
Hold on, I'm not finished. It's slavery for money. There's certain elements to chattel slavery for money, and the most important one being that you and your children and your children's it was a general. You would always be a slave.
Well, the
in the
Jews
slavery
were
in the slavery of old, you could buy your way out. Common. You had certain terms. In other words, for a few years you were out, and your children were not considered slaves. So the
Jews under Pharaoh was for 400 years.
I will contest that in that I do not believe that they were. It was an automatic thing that their children would also be slaves, and it was quite common again to either work your way out of slavery or buy your way out of slavery.
Not during Pharaoh.
But I don't. Well, and I'm not too sure about that. But I don't compare the plight of our Jewish brothers and sisters with the plight of Black Americans.
Okay.
I just don't do that.
My point is,
it's not comparable.
My point is, if we can agree that slavery has been through all history, all generations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was the first country in the world that abolished slavery?
That abolished slavery? I believe it was England.
Yeah. What was second?
I don't remember.
U.S. Or are they second or third?
Okay, but these are all facts that I do not contest.
Okay.
But you contest the fact of the effects of American slavery. Okay. Which is interesting.
But why? No, I'm not. But why is it only the U.S. that talk about slavery when we have had it all over the world? And you had slavery in the 20th.
Where is another nation where Black people living in a white majority are have a history listen to me, have a history which is a current history of oppression, suppression, and lack of equal opportunity like America has. Tell me that country.
Okay.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying tell me that country.
Okay.
And if that country exists, what is wrong with those Black people choosing to fight against that system?
Okay. No, I'm not saying that it's. I am 100% for equality. Mm-hmm. I'm not for equity. I'm totally like this same outcome, but I'm for the same opportunity. Yeah. So for example, like the thing is that the Black nations in like, for example, the slaves, like, for example, I have to be sensitive now. I'm not at all justifying anything. I'm just telling historical facts, right? The white slave owner or the slave owners, horrible, but it was something that happened all throughout history, all throughout the world, right? In Africa, who gathered up the slaves? It was other Black people that gathered up and sold their brothers and sisters into slavery, right? Right. Yeah. So, and
we don't disagree on that.
And Africa also continued slavery a long time after U.S. abolished slavery. Right?
Absolutely horrible.
Yes.
Yeah.
My point is, if all history has had slavery is not unique. The slavery in
nobody's saying it is.
No, slavery in U.S. is definitely not unique.
Yeah.
But what is
unique?
It
is unique.
No.
I want you to find another point in the history of slavery anywhere where it's similar to the way it was in the United States. You bring up the Jews. Okay.
Well, for example, this slavery, the slave trade, like Candace Owens has a great video on this on PragerU. Okay?
I just have to point out, Candace Owens, you mentioned Thomas Sowell. Or Thomas Sowell, I'm pronouncing it Norwegian.
Larry
Elder and Candace Owens. That's great that you listen to them, and I listen to them in the sense of, or with the intention of staying informed. But they are not Black leaders. I just want to make sure that you understand.
It doesn't matter for me. It doesn't like I.
That's fine. That doesn't matter. I just want to put that out there.
That we could come back to Martin Luther King Jr.
Sure.
I don't care about the color of your skin.
Yeah, great. But I'm just saying that
I want to come back. The only thing that I care about is the character. I don't care about if you're white.
And that's great. But yellow. I just find it interesting that people on the right always bring up the worst examples of Black representation. Because Candace Owens, Thomas Sowell.
Why are they? Because there are more and more people. There's a lot of Black people that agree with them.
How many? What's a lot? What's the percentage of
Okay.
Black Americans that you think
Well,
follow them?
There's more and more. Let's say it that way. There's more and more.
Since when?
Well, since
There was a boost. There was a micro boost of Black followers
that is
for
impossible
Trump
for me
during
to,
his presidency.
there's impossible for me or you to understand because we haven't talked. We have to rely on censuses, and we also see,
that
for
makes
example,
it not impossible. That makes it not
but for
impossible.
example,
All we have to do is look at the numbers, and the numbers say there were small bumps
but
of Black followers of Trump during his presidency, but it was almost hardly noticeable. And Black people overwhelmingly denounce the teachings of these people that you're mentioning. I'm just saying I find it very interesting that people on the right always pull up those names as examples during these discussions. It's just interesting.
The thing is that because they are saying something unique that is not the mainstream Black.
Absolutely, and that's how they make their money. Absolutely.
No, but
they're good at it. They are.
But the thing is that, okay, I hope that we can come back to a place where the color of skin doesn't matter.
Come back? I want to get there in the first place.
Okay, but the thing is that, well, we'll come back to the vision of Martin Luther King Jr., right? And that is also uniquely US and Canada, for example, like that, with predominant, everyone came from another country.
Yeah.
In Europe, for example, I think if you have what I'm scared of, and remember, I have a lot of immigrant friends. I love all people. I love all cultures. For example, I don't want to go to Japan and come to Oslo. I want Japan to, no.
I know what you're saying, but
I want Japan to be a unique culture, and that when I come there, there's this.
But Norway is a very unique culture.
But also, like, remember, culture is also partly the biology, right? So, for example, it would be strange to come to a small city in Norway and only see Black people.
Sure,
I wouldn't find that.
It's a majority white. Yes,
this is weird.
Yeah, that would be very strange. Yeah.
Right. So. I am also for conserving the uniqueness of cultures. So
what do you think threatens the uniqueness of the Norwegian culture? First of all, is it under threat here in Norway?
Well, if you look at Sweden.
No, forget it. I'm not asking you about Sweden. I'm asking you about Norway.
I think, for example, well, yes, I do think so.
Okay, what do you think are the main? Can you name me the two main threats to the Norwegian culture?
Well, I think the education system.
Yeah.
For example, and I think social media and stuff like that. I like take a biblical example. In Acts, it says that God put up borders of nations and its people. So it was a God thing that he puts out. Okay, that people group should stay there. That people group should stay there. And there was always some immigration. For example, like the Jews, you could be a non-Jew and come into Israel. But in order to be totally accepted by community, a male had to circumcise, right? Yeah. So there was, if you come in this country, it's our rules, not your rules. We're not gonna submit to your rules.
You're talking as if there is a frightening threat to the rules of Norway. Now, of course, let me say this in all openness. I worked within Norwegian immigration for a while. And I know that there are some people, in a group of 5,000, you'll find a couple who come here, with their chests out, I'm a proud wherever I'm coming from, and Norway is not gonna change me. And you do have people with that I call it a radical attitude. Absolutely, there are people like that, but they're not all over the place. But you think that there is a threat?
No,
against the.
Okay, let me say it this way: the average population growth in Europe, for example, in Italy, it's 0.8 kids per.
Horrible. Yeah. Yes.
So it's not the replacement level. Right?
That's true. That's very true.
In Norway, we're less than 2.1. That the Norwegian parents, less than 2.1. So we're not reproducing ourselves. We're going down in population. We're not creating more. And if you get then a lot of immigration, For example, no,
Yeah.
no. Listen. This is just facts.
It
Okay?
is facts. It is facts. Your numbers are correct.
And the immigration, like a lot of people coming from other cultures, they have a different value system, and they have, for example, they have bigger values on families.
Yes.
So they have more kids than Norwegians. So,
isn't that good for Norway?
Well, okay. My point is.
Hold on. Isn't that good? Or
no?
Let me ask you: is that bad for Norway?
Listen.
Yeah, but I want you to answer that. Because you're kind of talking around.
I'm not saying yes or no.
But a couple of but why not? A couple of times I've asked you, but do you mean it? And you go into an explanation, but you don't really answer the question.
Well, the thing is, because I don't want to be viewed as racist or anything like that.
Look, right now, let me say this again for everybody watching and also for you. Having these discussions, I love it. Yeah. Okay, you, as it stands right now, you're a friend of mine. Okay,
I think you're awesome.
Brothers, likewise. Yeah. We disagree on these things, and people, just because he disagrees with me doesn't mean he's better or worse than me. He's got bigger ears than I do. That's his only negative thing about him.
You have bigger arms.
But
I wish I had those arms.
but I don't want you to.
My point is,
you haven't said anything to make me think you're a racist.
No, but my point is, nothing. For example, if it's easier to take Japan because I think no one would say there. I would find it super sad if I came to Japan in 50 years, and most of the people were not yellow, or most of the people did not look as they do today.
So do you think Norway is in danger of having that happen?
In a few generations, totally.
What's a few?
Like maybe 3 generations.
And if I would say it would take a little bit longer than that, but if Norwegians don't start getting their hips in action, then sure.
but do you understand what I'm saying? That has nothing to.
And if Norway gets a little bit darker, if the music in Norway gets a little different beat, if the faces in the street are a little bit different, if you hear different accents and new languages, is that a bad thing?
Well,
and if it's bad, why?
Because
that is Norwegian culture evolving. Yes,
but the thing is that
Norway's not the same as it was 50 years ago, or 100 or 200, and that has nothing to do with immigration.
I totally agree.
Yeah?
The point is, I like the diversity in people.
Yeah, you've said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, if I I've never been to Africa, and that's one on my bucket list. But I've been to countries that are predominantly black or dark skin, for example, India or Tonga. I think that is beautiful. Mm-hmm. But if you have a lot of white immigrants or Japanese immigrants or whatever there, you're going to lose the diversity in, for example, what if all the black people married white now? Like, let's say that. In 2 generations.
I'm laughing because I'm a stand-up comedian and there's a lot of humor in what you just said. My mind just starts going. Anyway, go ahead.
The point is, I hope that we can still be distinguished, because I love distinction.
But aren't we distinguished? In Norway, there's different dialects. You walk across the street, there's a new dialect. Isn't that a distinction? You have city life versus urban life. Isn't that a distinction?
Totally.
And you, as a man who said, and I'm just going to bring this back around. Not as a gotcha moment, but I just want to ask you as a man who has said it many times during this conversation, that you don't care about the color of someone's skin. It sounds like you kind of do. Because if Norway gets too dark, if there's too much inblending of immigrants, you're not going to like you feel threatened by that.
I don't feel threatened, but the thing is that people like
you say it's a threat to the Norwegian society, though.
Yes, I do believe.
So you do care about the color of people's skin and where they're from culturally. See, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't see how you can separate that. I don't see how you can separate that.
I do care. Well, the thing is that let me say this. The interesting thing with politics, for example, like I would agree a lot more with RFK Jr. Than most Republicans.
Conspiracy theories and all?
Well,
you don't have to answer that. That's a whole other conversation.
What used to be conspiracy, you know that it was conspiracy theory that the virus was made up in Wuhan lab, right? That was conspiracy.
But science evolved by gathering more facts.
Okay. So it was a conspiracy until it was proven true.
Absolutely. And that happens. Okay, absolutely.
Right. So
absolutely.
That's just
one
and
there's more.
plenty
There's more
of those that conspiracy theory that proven itself to be true.
Sure, absolutely.
So, but RFK, what his basic view, or I don't agree with him on policies on a lot of things, but basic view is that he is he's a nationalist, so he's not a globalist. And the thing is that nationalist, I think
that's a scary word in America these days. Nationalist.
Well, not for a lot of people. But,
for most people, it is in America.
Okay, but I think that, for example, like I have I'm working in a company that we have like some people living in Sweden and working from there. In Sweden, you're viewed as a racist if you raise your national flag.
Yeah. And isn't that a sad thing?
That's super sad. Yeah. In Norway, we're walking proud with the Norwegian flag. What provokes me is the rainbow flag.
Why?
Because that is separating you. Because you were saying like, well,
what's wrong with that?
We're unique.
I thought you people on the right were into individualism.
Yes.
Come on now. Do you see? I don't see how you can make it mesh.
No, you are individual under a common thing. You're individual, but you have the same, like, for example, like Constitution. You're individual within the Constitution, but you all agree and you love the Constitution. You're individual in the country, but you all love your country.
So how does that not fit with someone waving a pride flag?
For example, like we have a school in Trondheim, international school, Barely. I was so pissed off when I walked there. There was all these different flags of different countries, which was amazing. What is a country? It's a geographical area, and a lot of people with mostly the same experience and mostly the same heritage. There's and stuff like that.
There's a certain amount of homogenous unity.
Yeah, that's a country.
Yeah.
And then you had the pride flag. Amongst that, pride is not a country.
No, I think that's a little odd in that context, but why would it make you so mad?
Because that is, what are you doing? Well,
yeah, what are they doing? Exactly. How does that harm anyone? It's a little odd.
It's super odd. And we
can even say it's super odd, but what's the harm in it? But the thing is that,
for example, like the pride, I'm standing for biblical worldview.
Okay.
The pride people, the thing that they use is that, we have to show tolerance, right?
I think that's a great quality in life and in society.
Okay.
Tolerance.
Is there any tolerance against my view?
Of course.
Because not amongst a lot of the pride people.
Of course there are some radical. Of course.
Transphobe, probably racist and all these things.
I know you're not a racist, but are you a homophobe? Are you a transphobe?
No, I have.
Okay, then stand firm on that.
But the thing is, what is a homophobe? Is it a homophobe to believe that the right thing, the best thing for a society is to have a man and a woman married? Is that a homophobe?
I don't define.
I'm a homophobe.
Okay, I don't define what homophobia is contrived of. I don't do that. But that's not my place to do that. And I will say this: there are, of course, in any group, and in the LGBTQ group, of course, there are radicals, violent radicals in some instances. Of course, they are there, but that's a micro % of that
that
community.
Is the people that shout the loudest.
Of course it is. But I'm asking you,
and I am sad of people not standing up against those.
Yeah, but people do. Fox News, Republican Party.
But I'm sad.
The state of Texas,
when the people,
the state of Tennessee, Florida.
Yeah, but
they do stand up against that violently.
I'm sad that ordinary people that maybe have some sympathy against towards the LGBT community don't stand up. For example, like I'm listening to Douglas Murray. He's a gay guy. Amazing. Wrote a book like The Strange Death. So he's a lot on Jordan Peterson, some of that. I listened to
that's why I'm not so familiar with him, I guess.
Dave Rubin is a gay guy.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything against gays.
No.
But I don't want, for example, like for example, this. There's a hierarchy of values.
Sure.
There's certain values that are better than others. Can we say that?
But the thoughts on what is better than others is not universal. People have their own individual.
I agree. But for example, like I on the way down here, I read the Declaration of Independence. and it says there that in the first sentence it mentioned nature's God
Mm-hmm.
and the creator God.
Mm-hmm.
And it says like all we hold these truths to be self-evident of all people have been created equal and been
Except for
and
the slaves.
and well, the thing is that remember, here's a difference. That was what they were striving for. The reality never came up there, but that was still
Because it
what they
wasn't
were.
important enough to them, and it still isn't, and that's why there are disparities.
But you agree with the
Mhm.
Constitution, right?
Sure,
you agree
absolutely.
with
I
that
can
goal.
recite the preamble to the Constitution by heart.
Well, we agree.
Absolutely.
We agree with the goal. So so let's keep to that. So and they were endowed. All men have been endowed by the Creator,
Mm-hmm.
and amongst these rights are the liberty, freedom, and a pursuit,
life, liberty, and
liberty,
and
and
pursuit of happiness. Yep.
Okay. What if you take away nature's God? Who gives you freedom then? The thing that kept US together, everyone believed that there was at least nature's law or there was a creator. When you don't have that, that is a foundation. That is a bigger foundation than life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Because life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is built upon.
But you're speaking as if the U.S. was founded as a theocratic nation, and it wasn't.
No, but everyone agreed that there was a nature's law, and there was a nature or creator God.
Yeah.
When you take those away, which a lot of the radical left has done, for
How
example,
so? I don't understand.
For example, like nature's law. Okay, is there more than two genders?
Yeah, but you're defining nature's law under your terms, and that's a very individual thing. People look, again, nobody is denying the fact. You say we have different facts. I don't believe you and I have different facts. I just think that in some instances we are interpreting those facts differently. Yeah. And I think that's the case across the board, especially in political discussions. And that fact is something that people ignore, and it turns to hatred and name calling and a lack of dialogue. Yeah. It's not a difference in facts. It's a difference in interpretation, and that should be okay.
But my point with that
isn't debate and discussion fun at the very least. I Forget totally about it being productive. Isn't it fun?
Yes,
it's a learning process. It's a learning both in what you take in, but it's also learning how to put your point of view out there.
Yes,
and I believe that there has to be an understanding that there is not a difference in facts. There's a difference in interpretation of the facts.
I agree with, but okay. I also think there's a different view of what is fact. Because, for example, you can say like, well, that's a conspiracy theory. Then you throw it in, well, that's not factual. And then those who believe that there's a conspiracy theory or that is true.
I believe that a conspiracy theory is an unproven series of gathered information. It's gathered information that stands as unproven. That is a conspiracy theory.
But most people, when you throw that out, then you don't really go into depth of that because that's a conspiracy theory. So you throw that out. That's how we view.
There's a lot of reasons for that, though.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But when you say that like blanket statement, then you throw that out. So you don't.
Yeah, but it's not a blanket statement in the sense that it's disparaging. A conspiracy theory, that term is widely accepted. It's a cultural term that has been widely accepted. That, and the other is a conspiracy theory. That in itself is a fact.
Yes.
Again, we can interpret what is a conspiracy theory in different ways.
Yes.
But a conspiracy theory is something that exists.
My point is that someone that believes the truth of the conspiracy theory don't agree with the fact that the one that says that, oh, this is just conspiracy theory. For example, 9/11 was an inside job or was it not an inside job? Was it the plane that took down the building or was it not the plane that took down the building? That is, for example, a very specific example. You have people that believe that there was bombs that took it down, not the planes. And you have people that believe that, no, it was the planes. There you disagree on the facts.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my only point. And I think there's a lot of those. But my point is that when a nation, like that's the only thing that keeps US together. Mm-hmm. I don't think diversity makes you stronger. I think diversity makes you weaker, but diversity with the common goal, and you can be, and what is diversity? If you have diversity in skin color, background stuff, great, but you have to have common values, common goal.
But that exists in America.
well, it's more and more. My view of it is more and more dissipating because
I would agree. I would agree.
yeah. So the thing is that, and for example, Norway, if you have, we have a Christian history in Norway. For example, if you get a lot of Muslims in, or if you get a lot of my point is, if you get a lot of those influence in, you're gonna disagree on what are the values that we build society on.
Not necessarily. I don't believe. Here's the thing. I'm not a Muslim. I'm a Christian, but I don't believe that. I believe that there's much more similarity with Muslims and Christians than there are differences. Of course, there's differences, but I don't think those differences get in the way of a constructive dialogue, of a unified existence within a society. You have society, then you have subsects of society that are divided up according to many things, among them religion.
I think that but for some, Jordan Peterson talks great about this. He defines religion as everyone is religious, because it's the most foundational thing in your life. That's religious, because that is okay. This I stand on no matter what. Everything is built upon.
And he defines that, even if you call yourself agnostic or non-religious, or even, he defines that as a religion.
Yes, because it's a religious talk. It has.
I've seen him. Yeah.
And I agree with that. So, like, if you're an atheist, you're still religious because there's something that you believe that it cannot be proven. You cannot prove that there's no God, for example.
So the act of being not religious is to rely on a certain element of faith. What I'm saying, people say they're not religious, but in that statement, they have a certain amount of faith that what they're saying is correct.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, even if you're not religious, you still have faith, which is religious. So it's this, it's a philosophical, it's an excellent debate to have. Absolutely.
So the thing is that when people in a society becomes too fragmented, that the deep foundation that they stand on and everything else is built on. For example, me and you. If we don't, and often we never come down to that level. If we don't agree on the foundational level, all our arguments up here is first of all, we're never going to understand each other because we never come down to the foundation.
Right. There has to be a common ground at some point, and from which a debate or discussion can be had. But my thing is I don't. And again, I have trouble getting what you're saying to match up. I have trouble getting what a lot of people on the right say. I have trouble getting it to match up because at the same time as you're a proponent of individualism, you say you disapprove to a certain degree of diversity. I don't understand that, because to be diverse within a group or subgroup is to be different on an individual basis. So it doesn't fit with this statement that you're for individualism.
Well, let me say this. If you're in a church, for example, what is diversity for one thing? If you're in a company and you, for example, like diversity as it is viewed now, in a lot of, or as I understand it, in a lot of left-leaning companies, for example, well, you have to have gay people or people from the LGBTQ community. You have to have women. You have to have men. You have to have minorities, Black, Hispanic, whatever. That's diversity. But they all have the same points of view. They all agree on their thought is not diverse at all.
Of course, I get it. Yeah,
I think that is where the right often is more for the diversity in thought than just the diversity in, well, I'm a gay, I'm a Black, I'm a woman, I'm a Hispanic. It's like, okay, I don't care about that, because that becomes then the identity of who you are becomes more important. So then you're going back before Martin Luther King, but it doesn't. The only thing that matters is character of your of you as a person.
Should be, yeah.
Yes. So then diversity should not be, well, we are totally different, but we agree on everything. That's not diversity. Diversity is, okay, we are individuals here. We disagree on things, and that is diversity. And when I see a lot on the left, for example, RFK Jr., he's on the left, but he has been he has been pushed out, and a lot of the left that don't toe the line, I find, has been pushed out of the left because they are thinking different. So, for example, black people like Candace Owens and Thomas Sowell and stuff like that, they're pushed out by the left. Well, you're not really black because you don't toe the line. Or like Biden said, like, well, if you don't vote for me, you're not really black.
Are you there? Nobody says that Candace Owens and Thomas Sowell and all these people, nobody serious is saying that they are not black. Nobody serious, and this includes President Biden himself, believes that if you didn't vote for him, you're not black.
But he said it, though.
Of course he did. It's right there for everybody to hear, but context is important. Anyway, Sowell, Candace Owens, these kind of people, anybody serious in the world of discussion, debate, political or otherwise, will say that they're not black, that they have been ostracized and had a majority of the black community, black American community, turn their backs on them. That's a fact. That's kind of like how the Republicans have ostracized and turned their back on people who are not for Trump. You know, it's a difference in thought, which shows, and this is a wake-up call to a lot of people on the right, Black Americans are not a monolith. We think differently. We have different experiences. You know, we haven't talked about my background, but a lot of people, if they've never heard me talk before on my show, they're going to think I have a certain background as a Black American. I guarantee you my background is different than what most people would expect, if they have any expectations at all. Because of the color of my skin. So it's you know, I think people on the right, they have a lot of thoughts and a lot of words and a lot of deeds that are missing. And I've said this several times, they're missing a certain amount of nuance. And it's that lack of nuance that causes people on the right, including you, to say things like, I am for individualism, and yet diversity is a threat.
No,
I don't understand that.
I didn't say that. Okay. The Bible says, like, the road to heaven is narrow.
Yes.
Okay?
Straight is the way and narrow is the gate.
Yeah. There's a ditch on either side.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not for no diversity.
Okay. But
if you become too diverse, you don't have anything in common. What is a community?
But there's a certain amount of judgment from the right about what is too much diversity.
Well,
that judgment is misplaced. Well, that judgment can very easily be so non-Christ-like.
But that is my point, is that there's a diversity that is healthy, and then it becomes diversity that we have nothing in common.
Yeah. And
so I'm not against diversity at all, but I'm just saying, like, when you have nothing in common, if, for example, a nation has nothing in common, is fragmented, and it's going to fall. Exactly. Absolutely. And there's no unity there. But again, I think you're talking as if Norway is right on the edge of reaching that fragmentation. I don't see it. I think you guys' culture is a heck of a lot stronger than that. I think that any changes... We have done a lot better than Sweden. I think, of course, Sweden has problems. I think that you guys' culture, just in the 21 years that I've been living here, has changed drastically, mostly for the better. But my point, you guys are so much stronger, and it makes me sad. It makes me sad to hear so many people in Norway. I'm not saying that is not true. Okay. My point is that those who don't want that change, they're out there. Yes, and I think it's very easy to demonize them, and I don't think they're demonized at all. Like my grandparents, as I mentioned, they wouldn't like to live in Oslo with all the different, where they didn't feel like. I know. But that is some of them that kept me from buying a house. But that doesn't make it bad. It's just a person. But it is bad when it's on a systemic level. But it is bad when it keeps otherwise good people from starting a good life. See, let me circle back to my situation. A lot of Norwegians, a lot of people roll their eyes the minute a Black man starts talking about racism, discrimination, lack of opportunity. He thinks he's a victim. Hell no, I don't think I'm a victim. I've never lived my life as a victim, but I have been touched by racism. I've told the story before on my show. This is new for you. This was in 2002. Snoopy and I, my wife, I call her Snoopy. Snoopy. I'll tell you that story. It's kind of cute.
We were looking for a house. We were living with her parents at that time in Hudum. And we were looking for a house, and we went to a showing, the visning. It was an old lady out in the districts. I'd say she was at least 60, 65 years old. And she was standing on her porch with the real estate agent. And my wife and I, we always speak English together. I speak Norwegian if I'm out and about. But for my show, as you know, I speak English. So we're out there walking around the outside area while this lady is standing on her porch with the real estate agent. We're speaking English, my wife and I, and this happens a lot. A lot of people just assume because I'm not white and we're speaking English that neither one of us understands Norwegian.
Well, that's the same with me and my wife. We speak
So people assume, right? And I think because of that assumption, which is okay, I don't care what people assume when it comes to my language abilities, but because people assume that, they have been heard by both me and my wife to say some pretty horrible things, thinking that we don't understand. Well, this lady said something to the effect of, whatever you do, talking to the real estate agent, whatever you do, don't sell this home to that, the Norwegian equivalent of the N-word. And they had a discussion.
What is that?
Neger, Neger, the Norwegian equivalent. And my wife and I, did she really say that? And she went on and on about how she didn't want to trash up the neighborhood by selling to somebody like me, on and on and on. Is that racism? She didn't just say, I don't want to sell it to that guy. She specifically brought the racial element into it. And she made her judgment purely based on the color of my skin. Now, that happened. And
can I give you I'm not saying that couldn't be racism.
Okay.
But listen.
Yeah.
We all make first impressions. Like when I came into the military, I said this to you on the phone. When I first came into the military, I stood I was dressed in black, short hair, pretty buff, and I stood there and didn't smile because I was ready to, like, I was military, and I was insecure. It was a new setting and stuff like that.
Sure.
And after a while, like a couple months later, we went out with the people in the platoon and had a drink and stuff like that, and we started talking about the first impressions of people. And they gave me the first impressions. Someone said that I was a Satanist. Okay, they thought that. Someone said that I was probably like a Rambo wannabe. Saw Rambo when I was 10 years old, and that's what I want to become, right? Those are not right impressions of me, because they were shocked when they became that I was Christian.
It's a prejudiced or a prejudging of you. It's a prejudiced impression.
We all do that, right?
To certain degrees, yeah.
We all do that. We only can break that to get to know people.
Sure, absolutely.
But with everyone else, we make a first impression.
Yeah.
Okay. And the first impression, they say, like, it usually takes 3 to 5 seconds.
Sure.
Right. First of all, you don't know the experience of that person that makes the first impression of you.
Of course not. Nobody ever does. No. If it's a stranger, you don't know anything about them.
For example, like if me and my wife went to Greenland, like, she comes from Canada, like, it's diverse. She had friends from every culture.
What city do you from
Abbotsford, right outside of Vancouver.
Okay.
Yeah.
Western Canada, yeah.
Everything. So when she came to Norway, like, there's only white people here. Like, she didn't like it because she liked the diversity, right?
Yeah.
So she knows everyone. But when we came to Greenland here in Oslo, we drove through there like a few years ago. And then we came to a street and we didn't see one person that looked Norwegian from descent, right? There were only like other colors.
Yeah.
She was scared. Oh, we have to get out of here. I don't feel safe. They had different clothes on. They looked a little rougher and stuff like that, right?
To me, that is a bad form of prejudging. That's a potentially damaging.
Potentially. But the thing is that we all do it. So for
not that. everybody doesn't do that.
No, but
Everybody prejudges to certain degrees.
Yeah,
To me, that being afraid just because everybody's dark skin is quite potentially damaging. That's a whole other end of the scale.
It can be. But for example, she came from Canada
Mhm.
and she had friends from all different cultures.
Yeah.
Okay. My point is that we all make that prejudgment. And one thing that you can never do, and what I'm saying to you that you have to be aware of, is that we all do it, and it's a part of human nature.
But I am aware of that. I'm a student of human nature. I'm aware of that. Absolutely.
So the thing is that when, for example, like,
but pull it back to this old lady and how she and what she said. How does that?
But my point is that if for example, a 5-year-old, when I had a 5-year-old, grow up in a white family, all our kids go to a pretty international school, so they're actually, I think they're 50% Norwegians, and everyone else comes from Africa or other countries.
Asia.
So they are very international, right? Mm-hmm. So there's not a bone in their body that is racist. But let's say my 5-year-old, and we walk down the street. If, for example, if I saw, or let me say me, if I walked down the street and saw a lady, I would not be scared. Right?
Right.
But if I saw a big man, I would be a little bit more scared.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's totally natural.
That's a form of prejudging, but there's no harm in that.
Well, maybe.
Potentially.
Maybe that lady could be a serial killer.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
And that man could be the nicest pastor that you ever met.
Both of them are forms of prejudging.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and you're okay with that, right?
It happens. Yeah.
Yes. If you walk down the street and you saw a white man, and you walked down the street and saw a black man, you were more scared with the black man than the white man because you only grown up in a culture that you see white people. Wouldn't that be equal? Or would that probably...
No, because one comes from a position of ignorance.
Well, both comes from a position of ignorance because we don't know those people.
One, yes, but here's another form of ignorance. You are ignorant of that black culture by admission in this example. You've never been around black people.
We are all ignorant because, for example, if you go
No, you're not listening to me. Everybody's ignorant about certain things, but I'm saying this is a position of social ignorance in that in this example you're giving, you or the person you're talking about has not had any experience with black people. So that is, they are ignorant of all things black people. Of course.
I don't have any experience of Africa because I've never been there.
And there's nothing wrong with that in itself. But here's where the problem is. And I'm still waiting for this to tie back to what that old lady said to me on her porch when I was trying to buy a house.
I don't think that was okay at all. But the thing is that we don't know her background. For example,
she obviously, it doesn't matter what her background is. She obviously had racist views about black people because she said it
in the news.
Yeah.
Okay. If you have a lot of immigrants and there's a disproportionate amount of crime, for example, amongst immigrant environment, if it is, okay, just take that.
And if
at least it comes out in the news, it seems like.
And
right?
I'll jump ahead and say that if you are ignorant of immigrants, in other words, if you don't know very many of them, what they say about immigrants on the news is frightening.
Okay. So if you come from that,
it's a position of ignorance. Yes.
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 And we're all ignorant. So
to certain degrees about certain things.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we can't know everything about anything.
Of course not. That's what life is about, learning those things.
But the point is that if she has listened to the news, and she has seen like, oh, there was not a black person that killing someone in Oslo, for example, or something like that, because they don't look the same as me. Like you've heard, like birds of a feather flock together.
Yes. So she will. Yeah, but this buzzard was.
I'm not justifying what she said.
No, but I'm going to tear down what she said and tell you exactly why there's no excuse for that, because she wasn't that old. You know, this was in 2002. I'm going to guess she was around 60, 65. And that is plenty of time. It doesn't matter whether you have seen anyone. She had an entire adult life to understand that people are people and we basically want the same thing. You don't need to buy a plane ticket and visit all 100 some odd countries of the modern world to know that. No, that's where I cannot understand racism. And I'll say this. I don't believe, and here's how understanding I am when it comes to racism. I don't believe that there are many racists out there who 100% believe their own racist rhetoric, because I believe that through life, you see there's probably several moments in a 50 or 60-year-old solid racist life where they're like, oh my gosh, I might be a little bit wrong because that guy's all right. That black dude is okay. Or black people can't be that ignorant. Listen to Thomas Sowell. He's kind of making sense. So they have these moments that put holes in their racist rhetoric. So I say that there is no racist who is permanently an unfixable racist. It can be fixed. It can be changed. They can have an epiphany. That old lady was simply wrong and racist in what she said, period. There's no justification for that.
My point is that, okay, what is racism? And I think when if we define racism as the classical definition of racism, is that you think that your race is better than others because of the color of skin.
She thought that I was not good enough to live in her neighborhood and buy her house. So yeah, she feels that one. Go on. What else is racism?
No, listen.
Yeah.
That is not necessarily what. Remember, I'm not justifying. I'm just trying to make because like when something happens to us, right? When we are hurt by someone, when we understand why that person hurt us, we are not so hurt anymore because we understand where they're coming from. Okay?
I know where she's coming from. She was a 65-year-old. I know where she's coming from.
But have you talked to her?
I know where she's coming. I'm going to finish this. I know where she's coming from. She was a 65-year-old white Norwegian woman, probably with very little contact, if any at all, with people who look like me. Yeah. Very, very traditional and obviously ignorant. Yeah. To me, racism is ignorance.
Okay.
So in that sense, I know where she's coming from.
But then for me, racism is such a bad thing. It's like,
of course it is.
But for me, it's like racism was the foundation of Nazi Germany that killed the Jews. Yeah. That's racism for me. Yeah. So when you
for me, racism is that and the subjugation of black people in America for over 350 years.
And 400 years. That is horrible.
Yes, that's racism too.
But what she did.
That's racism too.
But my point is that what she did, what I'm scared of is that it cheapens the word racism.
My friend, I don't believe in cheapening the word of racism, and that happens a lot, especially here in Norway. I've had white Norwegians say that people were racist against them because they were mean to them. Yeah. So racism is cheapened here in Norway. But that woman was racist. Yeah, and I'll take it a step further.
But let me take another example. Okay. If you look totally Norwegian, but you had like a traditional Sami.
My wife is Samisk.
Yeah, if you had traditional Sami outfit on, for example, Norwegian. Yeah. And she said, "Don't sell it to that Same."
That's racist.
Okay, what if you sell it to a? Because a lot of people say this to me.
It's racist if they're saying don't sell it to that Same because they have preconceived prejudice.
But is Same a race?
That is debatable.
Okay.
There are Sami who say that they are their own race, and there's others who say that they are not.
Let's say that you just come from up north, because I heard a lot of people that come up from north have gotten no from people getting an apartment because they hear the dialect.
Happened to my father-in-law, yes.
Yeah, they have the dialect, right?
Yes.
Is that racism?
No, because they're not a different race.
Okay. But but the point what I'm making is that if she had the exact same reaction to a person from up north and say, don't sell it to that nordlending.
Well, then she's very prejudiced against people who live up north. That's not racism, though.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with race.
But my point is...
That has to do with the inner subculture of Norway. Okay. That's not race.
But my point is that it would be the exact same motivation behind it. It would be the exact same...
Ignorance. Yes.
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 So my point is that racism, I think, is cheapened, because if you could do that, if she didn't give it to me because I spoke Trøndersk, If she
the
didn't give it
blood
to,
in my veins that I have that says that racism is not cheap.
okay,
that says that there are real consequences of racism are my uncles, my grandmother's brothers who fought in World War II, who did not get the do you know what the GI Bill is?
Yeah.
They didn't get that. Why? They are, I'll show you a picture of my grandmother and some of the old people in my family, but we are of mixed blood. So when I say I'm a Black American, I'm also a few drops of other things. They didn't know.
Most of us are.
They didn't know. Yeah, which is very interesting when it comes to diversity. Anyway, I digress. Long story short, my grandmother's brothers, my uncles, did not get to take advantage of the benefits that other soldiers got.
Yeah.
Yet
Because
another
of the skin.
Because of the color of the skin. So racism is a fact and it exists. And it gets cheapened when people try to explain it away. Oh, I don't think it was racist. No. And it really doesn't matter what the majority thinks in a sense, because they're not the ones experiencing it. Well, and to circle back around what I was saying in the beginning, I miss understanding and humility from the majority. Instead of saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Martin Luther King said it himself, where are my bootstraps? They've been taken from me. Okay. So I'm missing that empathy, sympathy, understanding from the majority that are so quick to it's beyond insulting. To me, there's a certain coldness when someone from the white majority, whether it's in Norway or here, and I guess I'm kind of poking at you. I think you can tolerate it. I'm talking about you to a certain degree. When people try to explain away the experiences of Black people.
I am not, but my point is that because racism and this is my point, racism for me is like deadly sin. It's like up here.
Yeah, but is it? Okay. Because but
listen, let me, this is how I view racism. Racism is deadly sin. And the last thing I want to be called is racist, right?
Right.
And most people feel like that. Racism is like if you're racist, you're like at the bottom with pedophiles, right?
But a lot of people who are afraid of being called a racist, they're not necessarily racist, but they're very, very reluctant to humble themselves, listen, and understand.
Yeah, but the thing is that as soon as you throw out the word racist, you go into a defendant position.
And that is the failure in the dialogue.
Yes.
Why get defensive just because the word is brought up?
Well, because we view it as the ultimate sin.
But if you're not committing that sin, I think it's horrible to kiss a pig in the ass, but I don't do it. No, I won't avoid the discussion.
My point is that I view racism as most people, I think, view racism is what Hitler was. He was a pure racist.
He was a racist, absolutely, but there are others as well.
Okay, but when in our dialogue, we think that is racism. I'm not him. I don't want to identify with him at all. So when you kind of bring it down to the lady that that said those horrible things, and remember, that lady that said those horrible things, I feel for you. That must have hurt. That must have been awful. But in the same way, it would have also hurt if I came down there and didn't get the house because I spoke Trøndersk.
Yeah, but listen, that's not racism. That's not racism. That's her being prejudiced against you because you're Trøndersk.
But why is she worse off not giving the house to you because you're Black and not giving a house to me?
I never said she was worse off. I'm just saying she's not racist.
Okay, but the point is that
she's racist what she did to me. If she doesn't sell to you because you're from Trøndelag.
But why is it worse for you?
See now, and this is what the right does. Did I say it was worse for me?
But racism.
I didn't say that. No, I never said that.
No, my point is that racism, in my mind, is a lot worse.
Can I say something?
Not just getting hurt because I didn't get an apartment because I was Trøndersk.
Of course it's worse. But in the context of having a discussion with you, I'm not saying it's worse. That will crush the dialogue. You hinted to that when people come out too harsh about racism, it just kills the dialogue. And I agree. Yeah. And that's why I don't go around trying to compare. Like I said, I don't compare the plight of Black Americans, the ongoing plight of Black Americans, with what the Jews are going through and have gone through up through history. I just don't do that. Just like I'm not going to say it's worse. I'm saying I believe it's worse. But if you came to me genuinely and said that you experienced discrimination,
Yeah.
not racism, but prejudice and discrimination, or discrimination through prejudice, as a trønder, coming from Trøndelag in Norway, I wouldn't say, oh, well, this happened to me and it's worse because I'm black. I would never say that to you.
But for me, it's
I would never say that.
But if people didn't give me the apartment because I was trønder,
that's wrong. That's prejudice. That's discrimination.
But you wouldn't see that person as, oh, that person is horrible. He just prefers people in Østlandet.
I would see that person as horrible.
Okay, but I wouldn't see it. He just, okay,
You come from a position of security and privilege as a person from the white ethnic Norwegian majority, and that is a great place to be.
That is, okay, this is where
it gives you a lot of freedoms. It gives you a lot of freedom. You don't have to worry about things like that. But the thing is,
okay.
Am I wrong? Do you have to worry about things like that?
I have to worry about a lot of things. For example,
I know you do, but I'm asking, do you have to worry about things like that?
Okay, why is that thing worse than that thing? That's my point.
Okay, because I don't like to compare, but if you're asking, this is like the third or fourth time you've asked, why is it worse? It's worse because that one instance where somebody would not rent or sell a home to you because you're from Trøndelag is much infinitesimally less likely to happen than it is to me to have that happen to me because I'm black. That's why.
But when it happens,
but in the event in itself, it can be just as life-changing.
Exactly.
You didn't get, but I'm telling you that we're not disagreeing on that. You can have your life wrecked as much as I can, because the same thing happened for different reasons. But it is those different reasons that brings in the difference in systemic severity, because this happens to black people much more often than it happens to a trønder. That is the difference.
But
the result can be the same. I acknowledge that. That is why I'm a champion, not just for black people. I am a champion for anyone who needs a voice because they're being oppressed. That's what I do. That's the work I do for everybody.
Fine, great. But in that work, and that is, you have good intentions, and that's great.
Thank you.
I am for example, like human trafficking. I've done a lot of missionary trips, like helping like people that are really struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm for that. Awesome. But the point that I am scared of is that, for example, like I am not a racist at all. But there's in all of us, it's like we feel more comfortable with people that we grew up with, or
of course, but that's not racism.
No,
that's not even prejudice.
Okay, but for example, if I prefer someone that looks like me, okay, that can be because, like, for example, in that situation with that woman was horrible. Okay,
it was racist.
But for me, when I hear that as a person, Norwegian, I'm just going to give you feedback. For me, what that hears is that it cheapens racism because racism for most Norwegians, it is so awful. It's Hitler awful. That by that
it may cheapen it for you, but racism. How much do you think that cost me?
No, but how much do you think
it's not cheapened? It's not the exact same.
Yes,
the exact same.
You wouldn't call that a racism,
because it's not. It has nothing to do with race. Okay. This has to do with race. But and you speak as if Hitler was the only propagator of Nazism.
No.
There's Hitler, but there's also Goebbels and Goering,
of course,
and all of these others, all the way down to the simple farmer in Germany who was a follower of the Nazi
100%
rhetoric and the Nazi philosophy. And there's the same thing with racism.
Yeah, but
you've got the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, and that goes all the way down to all of his minions, all the way down to the tiny little old lady living way out in District Norway who is a racist. It's just as racist.
I totally agree. But
I'm not sure, though.
When we have, like, remember, like, now I'm just trying to make you understand where most Norwegians comes from.
Believe me, I know where most Norwegians come from when it comes to racism.
We think that racism is awful.
Most of you do, yes.
Yes. So when that situation could have just as well happened to a trønder, and we would not call it, we wouldn't put it up to the pedestal, oh, you're Hitler bad. Because in our view, it's Hitler bad to be a racist.
Well, maybe you guys need to broaden your view, because there are other examples of racism besides what Hitler and the Nazis did. I think that's the problem in Norway. But you guys are not willing to words. But it's not just definition of words. It's also that lack of empathy, sympathy, understanding.
But
It's that lack
also,
of understanding that you guys are sitting in a position that I am not.
No, but then
And from that position, you guys should be able to have
then
a view
one feedback
and
from
have
that.
the ears to listen.
But then one feedback from that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of groups coming into Norway. There's a lot of minorities.
Mm-hmm.
Norwegians have enough with most people. Like, I have 5 kids. I have a job. I have this much empathy to give. Why are you so important that I should give my empathy to you?
You
because
shouldn't
there's
do
so
anything.
Because there's so many other people that have empathy. So my point is that.
So let someone else care about racism.
No. My point is, if you raise up, there's a huge problem with racism in Norway because of.
I'm not wrong.
No, but for example, that's a history of your example.
That's one example. That's one example, my friend.
Yes, but let's take that example. That is horrible. Someone from Norway could come in and experience all those same experiences.
I know that. My wife's family is from there.
But
I know that.
My point is, those people from Norway couldn't experience all the same experiences
Absolutely.
that you did, right?
But there's difference.
We would not put it up as racism because racism is so bad.
Justifiably so. You should not put the experience of a Nordlander because it has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with race. It would be
just as hurtful for me.
It can be, absolutely.
It could have been just as.
But it's not racism. And the results, here's an important element that you're missing. It's the results of those incidences. What is the cumulative result of that? Listen to me. As a Trønder, you can change your dialect and you'll be just fine.
I can't.
You could.
I can't.
You can't. Others can.
Okay.
I'll give you a good example. I know that there are Samisk people. Hold on.
Huh?
One second. There are Samisk people who, in order to make life good for them, denounced and distanced themselves, wiped out all elements of the Sami people from their existence, changed their dialect, and to this day, they and their descendants deny that they're Samisk. And they did that to escape being treated different. To escape being... Listen to me. Horrible. Also, up through history, there are several black people, especially in Hollywood. There were some actors and actresses who were, for them, lucky to be so light-skinned because of their bloodline having so much white blood in them that they didn't look black at all. People in the entertainment world and people just living their day-to-day lives. It's called passing, if you can pass for white. So people do that, and they do it consciously to escape the effects of racism. Now, those are a small percentage of people who are even able. There's a small percentage of people who want to do that, and there's an even smaller, it's microscopically small number of people who actually can do that. Like you said, you can't change your dialect, but a lot of people can and have in order to fit in. But you cannot change your bloodline. You cannot change your physical features within reason or your skin color within reason. And therein lies the difference in the effects of racism because you're black. And I'm telling you, because it is a more lasting, very often and mostly a longer lasting effect. Because when you put racist, especially systemic racism, and you put that on top of a person time after time after time, and you cannot escape it, that is going to affect your life. It's not about your feelings being hurt. It's about things happening to you that take you out of the whole thing about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which I said there is a very broad difference in availability of those things to certain elements.
It will always be.
And because of that,
white person has less
a poor white person still has a better chance at getting a job than I do as an educated black man with money. It doesn't matter what you think. That is a statistic.
Okay. I think that Thomas Sowell and Larry Elder and stuff like that would totally disagree with you.
Of course they would. That's their job. And they purposely disregard statistical facts from the Census Bureau. The Census Bureau is great for them when it shows how many black people live in poverty. But the Census Bureau is horrible for them when it shows why so many black people are living in poverty.
It can't
shows the expense.
It can't show you why.
And it most certainly
No, it can't show you why. Because, for example, there's
if you have a number that says that black people are getting this much education, or this, or this, listen to me. If you can get a statistic that says black people have this level of education, this much money, take those facts, and that can easily explain the situation of Black Americans if you analyze that and discuss it. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That stuff does show the why of our current condition in society, just like the stock market shows the current why of the economic situation for America as a whole, regardless of race.
My point.
The housing market in Norway is the why of the family economy for Norwegians. It's easily you can correlate.
My point. One thing that I just
and we have to wind this up. I have 6 minutes left.
Last point is that what I'm scared of is, for example, if we had this dialogue to all Norwegians listening, okay?
And all you have to do is listen or watch, and then we can have this dialogue in front of all Norwegians.
If you have that, no one wants to be put in the box of being a racist, right?
Some people are proud of it, but most people do not want that to come
99% Norwegians.
99.9%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, right?
Yeah.
What I'm scared of is that if, like, at least most people I know, the thing that we hate more than anything, or the people that we despise more than anything, is whiners, right?
But is a Black person who brings up an instance or two of racism a whiner?
No.
Okay.
I'm not saying that.
Mm-hmm.
My point is that you're to get your message across. It's like what can I do to improve myself? What can I do to be a blessing to others?
Yes.
I don't want to I want you guys to change for my life to be better. And when you come in,
I don't think anybody is asking for that.
No, but
very few people are.
Yeah, but the thing is that
I'm not.
No, and I think, and I think your motivation is great, and I think that you have a good heart, I really like you as a person.
Thank you. Likewise.
And you actually have a lot of good points.
Thank you, and I think you have a good heart too. And you're definitely not a racist, and I don't believe that you intend to hurt anyone. But I will say this: if I can say one bad thing about you, and I think you can tolerate this, I think you have very little understanding of the plight of people who are in different situations than you.
And everyone does.
Yeah, but I think you. I think
that's my point. I think that it's horrible to be judged, like, because you can have a Jew coming to you, or you can have someone from Kosovo coming to you and say, "Well, I don't feel like you understand me better. You should understand me better." Well, what is so important with you that I should use my time?
It's that statement right there. But it's that statement right there that is very easy to come with from a position of. A position within the majority.
But if I moved to Africa, I would be the same, and I wouldn't require them to understand me.
I think you would ask them to please understand you. I've never said anybody has to do anything. Hold on, I have to wind this up, and I'm sorry, but I would never ask anybody to do anything. I ask them to please give it a shot, try and understand, and listen before shooting it down or picking it apart. When you stand in a position of authority, not authority, but a position within the majority, people are just asking. They're not demanding anything, but they're asking for more understanding. I don't think there's any harm in that. I think it's Christ-like to open up for more understanding.
And when I have a relationship, I'm totally for it. But for example, if I move to another country, I don't expect the country to understand me.
And I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for.
But when I meet like one-on-one, I gravitate to those who I can show understanding to, and they can show understanding. I
have to cut off. This thing is going to cut off. You can see it right here. I call you well articulated. I call you wrong on a few things, and that's okay. You call me wrong on a few things. Yeah. People, that is okay. This is Coming Home with John Allen. I want to say thank you to Hans Jakob. Thank you. When we stop here, I want you to give me some information about the work that you do so I can let people know. Everybody go out there, love and be loved, and enjoy the process. Bye. Sorry for the quick ending. Goodbye.